And joining us now to assess the latest developments in Operation Epic Fury, we have retired Lieutenant Colonel Hal Kempfer, former Marine intelligence officer and CEO of Risk Intelligence and Planning and host of STRAT podcast. We're also joined by Mike Sarraille, retired Navy SEAL officer and Chief Talent Officer at the Overwatch Mission Critical. It's great to have you both back with us, guys. So President Trump today speaking down in Doral, Florida, saying that the military operation in Iran will be a short-term excursion. Here's what he said.
Within a week, if they were going to attack us, 100%. They were ready. They had all these missiles, far more than anyone thought, and they were going to attack us. But they were going to attack all of the Middle East and Israel. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they would have used it on Israel. We're going to have a much safer world as soon as it's finished, and it's going to be finished pretty quickly.
Colonel, we're entering week 2 since Operation Epic Fury began. Where do things stand right now in terms of neutralizing not just Iran's nuclear capabilities, but their ballistic missiles and what's ultimately still left to be done, in your opinion?
Well, what's happened is we've caused massive attrition of their launcher systems. The launcher systems for ballistic missiles, they have thousands of ballistic missiles, but they only have so many launchers. It was, I think I saw between 100 and 200 at the beginning of the war. So we very smartly went after the launcher systems. If they can't have launcher systems, they can't launch the missiles. They can have all these missiles lined up in these underground missile cities, but if they can't launch them, then they're just sitting there. That was one part. We also were very successful against the drones, taking out their air defense, basically wiped out their Air Force, their Navy. So their ability to project power has been dramatically diminished. And now we're getting very close to air supremacy, which means that we can fly all over Iran basically unopposed and hit targets at will. And at that point, I can't see how the regime really survives.
Mike, taking into account the first major strike that wiped out the supreme leader and 50 of the top lieutenants and some of their wives and whatnot, do we run the risk, if we don't see regime change, of sort of poking the hornet's nest if they still have some sort of capabilities in there? And is there any concern that they might be able to regroup and cause any havoc either in the region or beyond?
Well, I think Hal is right in the fact that we continue to decimate or just destroy any military capability and their ability to project power on a regional aspect. But I mean, with the announcement of the new Ayatollah, it shows you that the hard line is holding on for dear life. It doesn't change the equation whatsoever. In fact, if it signals anything, it signals confrontation and no compromise whatsoever. They're not getting the message. They're not going to leave. So, we've got to, with that air supremacy, maintain the operation for weeks, basically effectively doing hunter-killer ops. The second a target of opportunity appears, ISR assets guide in our strike capability, and we continue to hit them. Can they reconstitute? Yes. You got to assume at this point that they're living like moles underground, that the key leaders are in this mosaic of underground tunnels and bunkers waiting us out. And if they can do that, then there is a chance that they can retain power and ultimately go crying to China to rearm them, to help them, stimulate the economy post conflict here. And that's the biggest threat I see facing the United States and the Trump administration right now.
Colonel, to Mike's point, Iran has chosen its next regime leader. That's Mujtaba Khamenei, the previous one who was killed in a U.S. airstrike's son. Reports are that the son now, who's taking his position, also injured in airstrikes. The announcement just comes, a week after his father was killed in the airstrike. The president saying the elevation of the son is, quote, a big mistake. With that said, Mujtaba has been behind-the-scenes figure in Iran, in the power structure there for decades. What do we know about him so far, and is this a full circle to the same brutal dictatorship that we saw under his father's rule?
Well, of all the choices, Mujtaba Khamenei was basically a continuation of the same regime. It's his son. He was kind of the doorkeeper, if you will, the gatekeeper to his father. He was his closest aide for years. Ideologically, in terms of beliefs, the way he perceives the regime, he is seen as more of the same. And it is kind of an affront to the U.S., to Israel, to basically all the countries involved, that they would basically do this, that they would continue down this lane. He was seen as a favorite, and obviously he was chosen. This is not, of course, this is after Israel took out the original Council of Advisors voting area where they were supposed to select him. But there were other candidates who potentially could have been an off-ramp, but now Iran is stuck. They just don't have a choice in terms of leadership that we can really deal with.
Mike, NATO air defenses today intercepting a second Iranian missile that entered Turkey's airspace. In response, Turkey says it will act decisively to protect its territory without hesitation. Given Turkey's complicated relationship with Iran, what's holding them back from invoking Article 5?
Well, it's the same for the Gulf cooperation states. They're all in a defensive posture at this time. Now, you got to remember, we're on a 60 to 90-day clock due to Congress for this conflict. So that may be the second or third phase as we hand this conflict, or at least something similar to Desert Watch, if you remember the days post-Iraq War I, where we maintained some air superiority over the country, making sure that they're not rearming, that they're not enriching nuclear materials. But for something like this, I don't think we're going to invoke an Article 5. The U.S. and Israel have the situation in hand. However, ultimately, what is Iran trying to do? They're conducting economic warfare by trying to hit oil refineries or infrastructure in these states. They're trying to hit data centers. They're hitting tourism. They're trying to impact the region economically to put pressure on the United States and lose the information war.
Colonel, if you could weigh in on that, it does appear that Iran's strategy here, targeting their neighbors in the Gulf and beyond, Turkey, Qatar, the UAE, what does this reveal about the nature of the Iranian regime?
Well, Mike was completely correct. I don't think it's going to invoke Article 5, although what you do have could see it invoking Article 4, which is causing them to a discussion within NATO and conferring and talking about what this is. And this is not the first time. They went after Turkey. They also hit Cyprus, but they hit a British base at Cyprus. That British base is actually sovereign British territory. So technically, they attacked another NATO territory as well, or NATO country as well. What I think you're seeing is that this will be seen historically as a great strategic miscalculation by Iran. They basically went to war with everybody. They attacked everybody around them. They attacked all the Gulf cooperation countries, all up and down the Gulf, all the way from even to include Iraq above the GCC, to include Jordan. They've attacked, Saudi Arabia, obviously, which is central to the Arab world and to the Middle East. And then they've even launched up into Azerbaijan, up into Central Asia, and that was to deter Azerbaijan from weighing in with the Azeri nationalists in Iran. So they basically went to war with everyone. And where do they go from there? Where do you back off? If you hear the comments today from Qatar and from Saudi Arabia, they have truly stirred a hornet's nest. I've never seen the Gulf Cooperation Council turn so quickly and with such laser focus at one country and said, that's it. You are the enemy. We're going after you. I'm really surprised, and I would not be surprised if we end up seeing some of the Arab countries that Iran's got a war with turn around and maybe join the strike missions.
A lot of moving pieces, a very complex situation. A Washington Post report saying 2 Iranian ships leaving a Chinese chemical storage port this week in China. The vessel's owned by an Iranian shipping company that's been sanctioned by the United States for supplying material to Tehran's ballistic missile program. Mike, the ships are suspected of carrying rocket fuel precursors, chemicals Iran ultimately needs to make solid propellant for its missiles. Does China involvement here surprise you, and might we expect to see these ships targeted by airstrikes?
Doesn't surprise me, no. Much like we're finding out that Russia is providing intelligence to Iran for their strikes. That was to be expected. I don't think they'll necessarily strike these vessels. It'll be more akin to a visit, board, search, and seizure. Well, they'll take custody of these vessels, probably using maritime special operations, like the Navy SEALs or MARSOC. But they'll most likely, one, they're tracking them. We have good fidelity on their location. We're following them, and it's ripe for a VBSS mission and taking seizure of both those vessels.
Colonel, China has publicly stayed on the sidelines, more or less, since the beginning of the war. What does it say about their role when they quietly provide materials to Iran while openly calling for calm?
Well, both China and Russia have said they are backing Iran. Of course, they have a close relationship. If you look at Chinese investment in Iran, it was almost akin to the Belt and Road Initiative investments in terms of where they're trying to bring Iran into the fold, if you will, economically speaking, with supply chain movements and things like that. But China doesn't have the ability to project power. They just don't have the means to really put something in there. And they certainly can't go toe-to-toe with the U.S. or anything in the Indian Ocean, or certainly in the Gulf of Oman or anywhere around that. And they don't want to. They don't want to start a war with us. And so they can only do so much. I think Mike's absolutely correct. I think there's going to be a VBSS mission. I think it's going to be our maritime special operations folks. I think we're going to stop that movement. I think anything like that will stop that movement. Although I will say that I wouldn't rule out that once that ship gets into Iranian territorial waters, at that point there might be more than a VBSS mission to deal with that ship, because at that point there is no ambiguity as to its status of what it's doing, and it becomes a lawful target under international law. So I think China's going to try and support as best they can, but there's very limited they can do. Russia can't do much of anything. They're tied up. What they are doing is they're providing intelligence to target intelligence to Iran, and I find that very disturbing.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Hal Kempfer, retired Navy SEAL officer Mike Sarraille, really appreciate